So let's start. And as people come in, you can continue to share with us your name, your organization affiliation, and any material and responses you have for us in general. Good morning. I'm Suranjana Gupta. I work for the Huairou Commission. I'm sitting in Bangalore, India. Very warm welcome to all of you and thank you for joining us for this very interesting session that we have planned. Huairou Commission and SDI have together planned this session. And this session focuses on what women want. Now, before I go into the session, let me quickly put out the Zoom protocols and share that with you. I'm sure all of you by now are quite familiar with Zoom. There you go. So this meeting is being recorded and parts of it will be made available on the YouTube channel. And so by when you see the message come up on your screen and say continue, it means that you agreed to be recorded and some part of your discussion might be available publicly. Please don't share this link to join this. Please don't share this link on social media that can cause Zoom bombing. Please close all non-essential applications on your device, such as Skype. There's this chime or ring every time people come in. Is there some way to stop that, or is that my computer? I don't know. Please mute your microphone if you're not speaking, and feel free to use the chat box. If you have any technical issues, the person you can put it up in the chat, and the person to speak to direct your question to, I think, is Rafid. Rafid, if we just call you on the chat, are you going to be able to resolve the problem? Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be here.
Okay, there's Rafid. He's on the CBA conference. Yeah, you can see CBA conference, Rafid. You can personally message him or put it publicly on the chat if you're having some sort of technical problem. With that, let me start us off on our discussion today. You know, I was thinking about how to introduce today's discussion on what women want. I think one of the very important things that I realized was that often the ways in which we frame problems and solutions and challenges and talk about the work of women living in poor communities, whether rural, urban, or indigenous, is often framed by policymakers whose reality and perception is very different from the realities and perceptions and experiences of local groups working on the ground. And we get so caught up in trying to make the local grassroots women's experiences fit with those frameworks that then we start missing out on, you know, capturing it in a way that actually works for women. So I remember when many years ago we had a discussion, we had a meeting in Latin America with a lot of indigenous women and rural women. One of our leaders, Ana Lucy Bengochea, who's a Garifuna leader, said to us, oh, you mean we're talking about all these things that we've been doing for a long time, like reviving indigenous crops or growing organic vegetables, or, you know, people who are fixing drainage and sewage in their communities to prevent flooding. You're telling us that now all this is called resilience, all this work we were doing earlier. So I think when we develop our frameworks and our interventions and strategies and look at how we are going to support women to expand and deepen their own solutions that have worked for them, the starting point has to be around listening to how they experience the problem and how they articulate it. So today's discussion on what women want has identified 4 or 5 issues that grassroots women's groups have identified as major problems in their everyday lives that they want to address. And they've put in years of work figuring out how to frame that problem, how to find solutions, and then how to, in some case, scale up the problem. So today's discussion, grassroots leaders and NGO practitioners are going to talk to you about how women have identified specific issues, and they don't necessarily fit into the silo of, say, health or disaster risk reduction or water or sanitation or transport. But in many cases, these are problems which are identified with them by them as integrated and touching on multiple issues. So with that, let me stop and say that listen carefully, look at what you can learn from this experience, and then see how, reflect on how your own organization can build on this kind of work when you're working with local women's groups who are facing these everyday challenges. And finally, then we have to figure out how does all this speak to the discussion on locally led climate adaptation? Where do we find the space and create the space to promote and expand and build on these examples in the climate adaptation field? So let me stop there and now hand over to our surprise host who's going to manage the next segment of this session. And he's a much acclaimed anchor from the Climate Broadcasting Corporation, isn't it? And also has a day job at IIED, I think. And so please welcome Aditya Bahadur, who's going to take us through the next segment in which grassroots women are going to talk about their experiences, challenges, and solutions. Thank you. Over to you, Aditya.
Thank you, Suranjana, for that glowing introduction. I hope I can live up to it. I'm Aditya Bahadur. I'm a principal researcher with IIED, and I'm delighted to be speaking to you all today. Before we get to the panel discussion, I think we need to reflect on something very important that Suranjana said, that we continue to use external frameworks, our own ways of understanding the world, to interpret what we think are priorities for low-income women living in informal settlements and other vulnerable groups. Sheila Patel, the founder and director of Spark, who's also with us today, has written a really interesting, insightful blog looking at women's needs from their own perspectives, from the bottom up. And that really is the theme of the session today. So in that spirit, before we get to discussing the technical details of what we're here to talk about, I'd like to invite you all to respond to this Mentimeter that Anvesha is going to kindly post in the chat box now, and tell us what, in your opinion, are the priorities of women. I think, yes, the link has come up now. Do please go ahead, click on it, as will I, and let us know what you think. It's very simple. There are 7 options. You are able to select 3 choices to indicate what you think are the most pressing needs of women living in informal settlements. Do go ahead and do this. And at the end of the session, Shilajit is going to give us some closing comments, and I'll ask her to reflect on what she thinks are the interesting insights from the results of this Mentimeter. We'll give it another minute or 2, and then I will ask Anvesha to kindly share the results. I hope all of you are able to access the link. If not, just indicate in the chat box if there are any problems. Great. Anvesha, I think that's enough time for everyone. Why don't you go ahead and project the results? Aha. So safe and secure housing comes right on top. And then we have appropriate livelihood opportunities, and health facilities. Shilajit, I'd be grateful if you could take note and in your closing comments, tell us how this compares to what you found and what you said in your blog.
Okay.
Great, we're still getting some results in. So we'll let that process continue, but keeping the limited time for the session in mind, I think we'll move on to the next part of the session. Anvisha, thanks for that. I think we can take that off the screen. Now we're going to begin the session for which all of you are assembled here, where we have 4 excellent panelists who are going to shed light on different aspects of this vitally important topic that Suranjana introduced. We'll begin with Sarah Nandudu. Sarah, we know you as the National Coordinator of the National Slum Dwellers Federation of Uganda. A very warm welcome to the session. Thank you very much for joining us. Do introduce yourself and your work, and then describe the challenges that you're grappling with when it comes to transport in low-income neighborhoods and what solutions you might be surfacing.
Okay. As a way of introduction, I will now be put on my video for a short time to see my face. Oh dear. Hello. Hello. Hello.
Sarah, we can hear you. It's quite, the call quality is very poor, but I think we can hear you. Don't worry about putting your video on because we have a slide with your photograph on it being projected. So do go ahead, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the challenges around transportation.
Okay.
Over to you.
My name is Sarah Nandudu. I am the coordinator of the National Slum Dwellers Federation of Uganda, and we are affiliated to Slum Dwellers International. This is a network of community dwellers, or slum dwellers and informal dwellers who reside in slums as well as in some informal settlements. We are a network in about 21 municipalities in Uganda, and major
Sarah, I'm really sorry to interrupt you, but the call quality is so poor that we are unable to hear you or understand your contribution. So I'm sorry to interrupt, but
these challenges do not just come from air. We sit down and analyze what we call through data collection. Our major role is to mobilize women first.
Great. I think we've lost Sarah. We're going to go on to our next speaker and give Sarah to switch on to a different Wi-Fi network. A very warm welcome to Suzini. Welcome to the session. Do please take yourself off mute. Tell us a little bit about yourself and the challenges that you're grappling with when it comes to housing.
Okay, thank you so much. My name is Sazini Ndlovu, a federation leader from Zimbabwe Homeless People's Federation, which is SDI. I'm going to talk about roof over our heads. Likewise, a proper house can induce a sense of satisfaction to families and reflects the well-being and quality of life of a community. Meaning adequate housing provides security, protection against harsh environmental conditions, and promoting physical and mental health. So roof is one of the elements for a proper housing structure. slum settlements are mostly identified with poor housing, especially walls and roofs. Roofs and structures often change due to weather changes. So Zimbabwe is not an exception like all the other slum communities globally. Climate change adversely impacted slum communities, and they are succumbed to seasonal challenges like wind, blowing rooftops, rains causing floods and destroying structures, leaking roofs, hot seasons causing hot temperatures inside, and because of poor ventilation, making it difficult to stay in. This becomes vice versa during winter. It then becomes too cold again. Also, we have a problem of fires burning down the shacks, resulting in the loss of life. Cyclones also wiping humans, animals, and all the infrastructure. The most affected groups being women and children. As communities, these are our interventions that I'm going to talk about now. We are slowly engaging local authorities, government, and other stakeholders to be part of the solution. This involves the community. There is and community savings, cheap quality, preparedness of the rain season by cleaning stormwater drains and planting trees as well as planting trees as windbreakers. The communities lobby for transitional housing whereby land belongs to private owners, or it could just be the remaining pieces of land which are swamps. Whenever you try to put proper buildings, demolitions are the order of the day for homes and for our markets. So by engaging the government and authorities on slum upgrading, especially on issues of water and sanitation, where opportunity arises and we get proper land, we start to build incrementally within our affordability using our small loan facility. So now I'm going to talk about what women want. What works for women works for the entire community. Basically, there is need for timely assistance when calamities arise. Communities want affordable building materials that can withstand weather challenges. Communities also want sound partnerships with cities for better and water sanitation plus energy. Communities want support along transitional housing when need arises. There's also need for more assistance on research and development on alternative technologies that are resilient enough to withstand environmental shocks. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzini. That's a really interesting initiative attacking a very important problem. I think just so that the people who are gathered have a clearer idea of the impact that this had, could you illustrate an example or two from a community that you're very familiar with on what kind of impact the solutions that you're surfacing are having or we can have in the future?
Okay. Like in my country, Zimbabwe, almost every year, our slum communities are facing the problem of wind. When the wind, when the season approaches, for example, like we have a slum community like Kilani Slum settlement, which is located in the second city, Bulawayo, in Zimbabwe. This community succumbs to all the weather challenges. When the rains come, people are soaked. Structures fall, And when the winds come, they blow off the rooftops and become so dangerous. The iron sheets, sometimes people will remain with cuts.
Yeah. I think we've lost Zini here.
I think she disconnected, I guess.
Okay. I think I want to bring Shilajit in for a minute. Shilajit, thank you for your comments in the chat box. Tell us a little bit about why you feel this is an interesting example of really understanding what women want and what to you stands out about this example.
Thanks, Aditya. And I'm really sorry that both Sarah and Sazini have such poor network connections. The reality is that almost 85 to 90% of housing stock in which poor communities live is designed, constructed, financed, and repaired by communities themselves. For all the large housing projects that are available worldwide, hardly 5% actually get access to any form of subsidy for housing construction, repairs, or the loss and damage calculated during this process. You know, in the COP, you're going to talk about the LCD countries want to talk about loss and damage. Nobody's talking about the yearly loss and damage that occurs due to climatic challenges that poor women face. And we're saying that construction materials contribute hugely to carbon emissions. And people end up purchasing this material time and again and facing repair costs that really deplete their resources. So if you want a resilient basis in the habitat process, you need new collaborations which start from what women want. They want a safe and secure home with materials that are dependable and affordable, that are available at scale locally for their construction. This is what each woman wants, yet it has huge implications for all the urbanization processes that represent 40% of the city housing stock that is informal today globally in the global south. So that's, you know, it's a humble demand from women, but it has huge implications globally for the construction industry's commitments to addressing this challenge. When you talk about building materials, you're not only talking about building materials for these fabulous high-rise 100-story buildings that are now beginning to come into our third world cities. So that's the perspective we want.
Thank you, Shilajit. That's really interesting. I want to give Sarah Nandudu another chance. Sarah, I don't know if you've been able to switch Wi-Fi's and if you're on a more stable connection now. If you are, do please come off mute and let us know. Otherwise, we'll move on to our next speaker. Great. There you are, Sarah.
Okay.
Over to you. Tell us a little bit about yourself and the challenges around transportation that you're grappling with.
Okay. My name is Sarah Nandudu. I hope you hear me well. I am Sarah Nandudu, the National Coordinator. National Coordinator of the National Slumbers Federation of Uganda. And I want to be very brief to this. The challenges that women go through, one, flooding. And this causes a lot of issues in transportation because as the roads are flooded, we have ended up losing women in drainage channels because as they jump over the flooded areas, they end up in the drainages. So it's a very big challenge to women. And we've lost a number of women working in informal markets in such an issue. Another one is housing. You know, housing is a very key component in our areas. So you realize that a house is a right to someone. But in this context, you find that women are having issues with housing in that it has also impacted on their livelihood, causing illnesses because the houses are not in good condition. And so they end up in a very bad shape. Two, road network. You know, in informal settlements, you find that we don't have a road network that people use. Hence, this is an issue that makes them to be vulnerable to insecurity. However, because of this, our organization has come in to collect data on finding out the key areas that are prone to insecurity to women. And we've involved boys and the youth that are prone to causing insecurity by grabbing women's bags, killing them. We've involved the women in the process in that they map out areas that are prone to insecurity. And so they have been able to label them themselves, to earmark and say this area is insecure. We stand against women violence, violating women's rights. We stand against fighting women. We stand against killing women. So they create awareness in that area. And they also go ahead to put things like security lights, street lights, that help make these women to be at least protected from people who come and gang up to kill them and then maybe rape them. So we made a process in that the boys themselves that cause insecurity to the settlements are the ones again policing the settlements. And this was ably done through the Safe and Inclusive City program that was supported by Plan International. So women have been able to come up and work with their own children to force security in the towns, to cause security by putting street lights, and then in the way of putting better roads. So this information we collected, the information we collected was to support the municipalities to make sure that they put better roads for women to go through. Some of the settlements have been successfully done in that now women can afford to walk on a proper road, which is not flooded, and so cases have been lessened. And then for transport, hello?
I'm sorry, if you're...
Please continue.
If you're not speaking, it would be great if you could put yourself on mute. Sarah, please continue.
So what has happened is that the data we collected is informing the city, specifically Kampala, on how public transport is supposed to support women, because
Sarah is on mute. Sorry, Sarah, can you please unmute yourself?
So you find that women end up being raped in the bush because they're moving on motorcycles. So now the government has come in to put a policy that they want to put at public transport. And we went ahead to support taxi drivers, sensitize them on the role of public transport area, how to protect women. Because many women were complaining when they go into a taxi, they fail to pay or they pay less. Men grab them and push them and touch their breasts. Some of them are lured into unprotected sex because they have to pay for their fares that have not been paid. So now what we did is that to sensitize the communities to understand that women matter in the community. And this has helped us together with the police and then community policing. So women, in terms of transport, we have tried to sensitize the local leaders together with them and the communities to make sure that where a woman is passing should be secure. And so by so doing, there are lots of security lights that have been put in to allow a woman to be transported in a better place so that they can be able to reach where they are going and when they are safe. And then because of the data we collected, it has been able to inform other organizations that have come in. Recently, we had a survey which was pointing out what is the major transport that is being used in our settlements. And because of this, it is informing the city to plan roads that support informal women or informal dwellers to use a proper transport system. Because if you're using a bus and then the road that are made in the informal settlement is a narrow road, then it will not favor the community. So this information has been shared with the city to show that in this settlement, the number of transport system we have seen that is available used by women is a motorcycle and small cars. So now it is helping them to plan the roads that are capable to transport people properly from those settlements. So that is the role that women have come up to play because they want to improve on their transport system in that way. However, majorly the youth have been brought on board to support this process because they are the futures of tomorrow. And then if we plan for them minus them, maybe in the future it might impact on their lives. So we plan together with the youth and then they are able to put in their input in the report so that we share it with other stakeholders. However, this has been possible because we have brought on board key stakeholders, the government, the police, the transport sector, the private sector, and we plan together for sustainability and improvement of our settlements. I think briefly that's what I can share. I've been interrupted with network, so
Fantastic,
somehow I
Sarah.
get disorganized with what I've arranged. Thank you very much for giving me the second chance to speak.
No, thank you very much for joining us. And I think yesterday you attended a session on radical collaboration. I know, and I think this certainly sounds like an iconic example of radical collaboration. We'll be sure to invite you on the next session on that. But there are two things that stand out for me in what you've said. One is when one thinks of transport, one automatically thinks of technical solutions, new types of buses, more nodes for transport networks, and other quick fixes that governments have often invested in. But what you've said highlights the deep-rooted structural issues that need to be ironed out in order to make transport accessible to all. The second thing that really struck out for me was the process of data collection that informed the work that you did. It was truly a bottom-up data collection process, not an expert-led process that typically drives other infrastructure and transport projects. Sarah, could I ask you to come back in for just a minute and give us a very quick overview of SDI's approach to data collection and how that was implemented in this example that you talked about?
So our tool is a generous tool, let me say, but sometimes we, like for this particular project, we did a data tool which is geared towards transport, and then the infrastructure in the cities. In the city, specifically Kampala. So this tool was bringing out the impact or the effects of the transport system in that settlement versus the people who stay in this settlement. So we had to structure it in that it was capturing how many cars, private cars, small cars pass in this settlement, how many public cars pass in this settlement, and which size of the car pass here, how many motorcycles pass in this settlement, and how many do transport. So in analyzing this data, we realized that the small transport cars were the ones that were ferrying people more, as well as motorcycles. However, again, it also brought up an issue that much as small motorcycles carry people, there is a danger in that some of the women have been tormented from motorcycles. As motorcycles drive them away from their home, they end up insecure in that they end up raped in the settlements. They end up even taken away. I mean, they are abducted and taken to places that people don't know. And in the end, you realize they're being killed. So in the data, we realized that the safest transport was a small car, which is a taxi. We call it taxi, which was able to ferry people safely to their destination.
And sorry to interrupt, but this data was collected by people in the informal settlements themselves and analyzed by themselves, right? That for me is the really interesting and key part of this example that then allows us to surface solutions that are contextually relevant. So I'd just like to thank you very much again for coming in, and we look forward to hearing from you again in the breakout groups. But in the interest of time, I would like to move on to our next speaker, Leah Candela from the Philippines. Leah, we know you as a grassroots leader and a community organizer. Please do go off mute and tell us a little bit about yourself and the initiative that you've been involved with regard to reducing risk from disasters.
Okay. I'm Leah Candela, community organizer of Grassroots Women's and president of our Tampa SOFP here in Katmon, Tanawan, Leyte, Philippines, with 30 members and affected also by Typhoon Haiyan. Our major problems due to climate change and disaster COVID-19 is our food and livelihood. Because our livelihood stopped, we lost our everyday income to support of our daily expenses. We thought to expand our planting so as not to starve and to have sources of income to support for our daily needs, like to continue rice farming, vegetable gardening, and root crops gardening. If we harvest our plants, 20% for our foods and 80% we sell it into market and nearby barangay. This gardening starts from Typhoon Haiyan. The Department of Agriculture from our local government unit support us the seedlings, fertilizers, and trainings for all farmers because they know our main livelihood and they gave us free insurance for our farming. We, Tampa SOFP organization, help us also to our community the importance of existence of gardening. We consensus also our organization to have a food bank from our savings interest because we have a savings mechanism. When start pandemic, our transportation cost is increased. So our food bank have big help to our community because they don't need to travel to market. If we have also heavy rains, our area is flooding. So we can't across to market or to other places. So our community can buy now in our food bank. Mostly 200 families can benefit our food bank. We have also Community Resilience Fund using for local-to-local dialogue, organizing for grassroots women's. Through organizing our grassroots women's, we are recognized so our women now part of decision-making spaces like the Municipal Development Council, and some in barangay level, our women are elected as barangay officials. For me, I think as a grassroots women, it is important to be organized and recognized as trusted partners in managing resources in all development programs that our government and private institutions want to implement in our communities. Thank you.
Right. Leah, thank you so much for that intervention. Really interesting. I would like to invite Jokas to please go off mute and join us for a minute. Do introduce yourself, and it would be really great if you could shed some light on what were some of the key learnings from this and what advice you might have for others trying to replicate this really interesting example in their own contexts.
Okay. Hi, I'm Jokas. I'm one of the grassroots leader and the project manager of Dampa SOFP, a grassroots women-led organization from the Philippines, and I'm one of the governing council of Huairou Commission. I think it's very important that although we suffer, like there is disasters because of climate change, all we need to do as grassroots women, my advice is we must be organized. We must be organized, be capacitated, and we need to collaborate and partnership with different stakeholders and do savings mechanisms. Because in our case, in our experience as grassroots women, through savings mechanism, especially during lockdown of COVID-19, we can use our savings in providing food packs for food security. And it's also very important that if you do savings, you are recognized and you are trusted by partners to be a part to manage any resources or projects that they want to implement in our community. So it's very important to be organized. Our grassroots women must be capacitated. We need to collaborate and partnership with different stakeholders, government, non-government organizations, UN agencies, and we need also to be a part of decision-making, because if you are recognized and you are organized, you will have a political power, a political clout, and you will be a part of any decision-making space from the local, national, regional, up to global level. Thank you.
Thank you, Jokas. I think that's a really valuable message on ensuring that in trying to find solutions to these problems, we recognize that these are inherently political processes, and that political power for those who might be vulnerable is crucial to surfacing solutions. I'm going to turn to our final panelists for this afternoon. Naseem Sheikh, a very warm welcome to you on our panel. We know you as the Associate Director of the Swayam Shiksha Prayog in India. Do please introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your work, and then talk a little bit about your work on health and nutrition with women living in informal settlements. Over to you.
Thank you, Aditya. Am I audible? Hello?
Yes, perfectly.
Yeah. So thank you again. I am Naseem from India. I'm associated with the Swayam Shiksha Prayog and Huairou Commission since last 25 years. And I'm basically working with women for women's empowerment and leadership. So we are working closely with the women farmers and entrepreneurs for their well-being and empowerment, economic and social empowerment. So this is the work we are doing across 7 states of India. More than 5 lakh women are in our network, and I'm going to share our initiative about health and nutrition. Like 2000 in India faced various disasters, and especially our Marathwada region is drought affected. Severe drought affected, and in 2015 we have continuous 3 years drought, and all the farmers lost their agriculture income, and they are having no water and no powder for animals, and the crisis is very big. There is I can say one line, there is a history of our region. Government brought water from railway to provide drinking water. So this is the first time happen in India. Government brought water to the region to supply the drinking water. So in this region, the health and nutrition is very bad, especially nutrition is very bad because though India is Indian economy is depend on the agriculture, and farmers want to just to take the cash crops because they want to earn more money, and they are not man farmers especially, they are not care about the food and nutrition. So during that drought, we realized through the data, most of the women are anemic. Women and girls are anemic, and they are under stress. How to arrange the food for their family, and they are not having any voice and choice to say in the family what kind of crops the family has to plant during in their agricultural land. So with that data and with that learning from the drought, we created an initiative called Women-Led Climate Resilience Food and Agriculture, Food and Nutrition Security Model, which comes only for focusing on the food security. We're not just cultivating food. We are very conscious about the nutrition value of the food. So in the model, how the women should make mixed cropping, where they can plant cereals, pulses, and oil seeds, especially green vegetables, which comes very early and with low cost. And in agriculture sector, when the men's suicides are also high, because they think in agriculture, only the cash crops can give the income, and if the incomes and they are doing more, using more chemicals, more inorganic things to increase the productivity, and they do more expenses on buying the fertilizers and pesticides from the market. So these all reasons and all the learnings from the drought and the close using the data, uh, collecting the data of various points, our initiative, how the women should empower in agriculture to negotiate about the access of land, as well as to take decisions what to plant and what to sow in their agricultural land. B, how she can secure food for nutrition food for her family. C, she can earn some money for her daily cash flow. So this is the initiative we have.
Right. So Naseem ji, I think that's really interesting. We're running out of time, so I'm going to ask you a couple of quick questions. One is, do you have an idea of the impact that this initiative has had? Have you seen shifts in the nutritional status, health status of women that you're working with, or other ways in which you're measuring impact?
Yes, like when I said about the anemia, like women and girls are I can say one example. We have the woman Manisha. Her family is having half acre of land, and they don't cultivate that land, and they're just going to the labor wages. And when we find her anemia level is at 6, and they are just going for the 150 rupees INR, 100 rupees daily wages. So with that, after when she connected to our network and she went through all the trainings and awareness mobilization meeting, she realized if she will practice this model, she started that practicing that model in her half acre land. First year she is able to secure the food. Then second year she added allied businesses to increase her income, and then in third year we realized her husband also stopped the going out for the wages, and they access land on lease, and they increase their cultivation within their land as well as the land on lease. Now they are secure for income as well as the food. So this is the impact of our initiative.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's a really poignant example. I think we've had 4 excellent examples, 4 excellent speakers. A huge round of virtual applause for all our panelists. And Suranjana, back to you.
Thanks, Aditya. Thank you for those very interesting presentations from our panelists, who are also very seasoned leaders. I was actually sharing some insights in the chat where I thought what is interesting is the way in which women frame these problems very differently. So I was thinking about transportation, where people only look at, transportation specialists only look at the hardware and the road networks, and don't think about the issues of safety, which women have brought into that transportation discussion. Similarly, when we talk about gender, I don't think people think enough about transportation as a gender issue. When people think about violence, they think about domestic violence. Do we think enough about safety in public places? Of course, these are increasingly gaining currency, but it's because of the work that these women have been doing for such a long time that these issues are now gaining recognition. Well, the next segment is going to be breakout groups, and you're going to be randomly put into breakout groups. So if you don't know the issue at all, you learn a lot about it. If you know the issue very well, you're going to contribute a lot to the group. So don't worry too much about the groups. There are 4 groups based on wages and wheels, dealing with disasters, greens in our meals, and what's the 4th one? Roofs over our heads. So you're going to go into 4 breakout groups where you're going to reflect on what kinds of examples you know of in informal settlements that women are, the kinds of solutions women are coming with or exploring to address problems, how it speaks to climate change and the solutions we're looking for to adapt communities to climate change, and what can partner institutions do to support and nurture grassroots-led initiatives that work for women, okay? So off you go into your groups, and it's going to be randomly, you're going to be randomly assigned, okay? Rafeed is going to assign you all to groups, and each group is going to have a moderator, a facilitator, and someone to take notes. And we're going to come back in, I think it's 25 minutes. So you'll have an opportunity to share your work there. Thank you.
I think we're all back in plenary now. I'm sure everyone had really interesting discussions in the breakout groups. We're running out of time, so we're going to make this really short and hopefully sweet. I'll request the people leading the breakout groups to come in and in a maximum of 40 seconds, give us a taste of what was discussed in your groups. And I know we've all taken notes, so I have no doubt that the organizers will compile them and share them so that we're all aware of what's going on. We want to make sure that we have a few minutes at the end for Shilajit to provide her reflections and talk about her blog series as well. So I'll start with Anvesha and Suranjana. Do go off mute and tell us a little bit about what happened in your breakout groups and give us a flavor of the discussions.
Anvesha, are you comfortable doing it, or would you like me to step in for the 40 seconds?
Step in, please.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
I hope this is, you can see the screen. Yeah.
You can see the report, but I'm going to just tell you some important words that I heard, okay? So one was, I mean, among the strategies that I think were very important were the kitchen gardens. We heard about people growing food in Nairobi along the riverside. We touched on a number of issues: the cost of food, the private sector, supermarkets, the inadequate quality of food there, and we talked a little bit about the need for the private sector to look at how they need to invest differently in food, green gardens. Government can look at greening in every village, and some things about how governments are promoting campaigns on urban gardening and kitchen gardening. So those were some of the things that stood out to me.
Okay, wonderful. Anything else from you, Anvesha?
Anyone in my group can add.
Yeah, anyone can add. I just, there were, we discussed the challenge of food, especially in urban settlements due to the lack of space, and also the recent increase in demand of local vegetables due to the urban and rural migration. And so how can partners strengthen and scale up this solution? Under that, I just want to emphasize one point on building capacities of women in farming and entrepreneurship to sort of put them in charge and to ensure sustainability. I think that was that. Yeah.
Right. Thank you. Ariana, over to you for your 1 minute overview.
Oh, you've increased it from 40 seconds to 1 minute.
I realized 40 seconds was an unreasonable request.
Let me share my screen. Okay, so this was ours. I'm not going to read it all because it will definitely take more than 1 minute, but we had some really good inputs from Philippines and Uganda, Nepal, Malawi, Kenya. So the first question, there were a lot of good examples described of ways that communities and informal settlements are creating and benefiting from locally led climate solutions to address issues around construction and housing. And I think they also speak to kind of the interconnectedness of a lot of the issues, as Suranjana touched on early on. So in the Philippines, there was an example of a settlement threatened with eviction because they were in an area that was prone to flooding. And the place they were meant to relocate to had no, was very far outside the city, no livelihood opportunities, no basic services. And they managed to negotiate with the government for 15 low-rise buildings, with a community-based group that would manage the housing that was close to the area where they had lived. And so instead of moving far away. And then there were some other examples of kind of eco-friendly construction materials in Uganda using plastic bottles to create concrete blocks for construction of sanitation units. In Nepal, communities addressing flood and landslide, which are threats to the housing and the communities overall through solutions like planting of sugarcane and grasses. And the grasses can also serve as food for livestock, which creates livelihood opportunities. There were some examples of eco-sand toilets, and which is a waterless toilet technology used in a number of countries in Southern Africa. And then the manure from those can be used as fertilizer, which then helps, with urban gardening and such. And then there was quite a lot of discussion around also what partner institutions can do to strengthen and scale up these solutions. And I was lucky that a lot of the women in my group are working in those communities and, are community leaders who have a lot of experience working with partner institutions. So, there was a discussion of channeling resources to ongoing projects instead of starting afresh every single time, providing flexible and accessible financing for these kinds of initiatives that also, needs to be coupled with the willingness of partner institutions such as local government to really take these local knowledge and community-based solutions seriously and be willing to fund them. And, I think just lastly, because I'm sure my minute is up, that in connected to that is really being willing to use the data that's collected by communities to inform policy and planning. So, I think taking that local knowledge and the work that's done there seriously and not just brushing it off is obviously key. So yeah, I hope that does justice to the discussion. Yeah, thank you.
Really interesting. In the interest of time, I'm not going to project my screen, but rapidly run through some of the things that stood out for me in my breakout group. We had a really interesting example from India, from a drought-affected region where there's severe water shortages and food shortages, about a women-led climate resilient food security model that has achieved rapid gains. In the same area, there's also been experimentation with expanding the propagation of seeds and making sure there are enough seeds to grow vegetables and foods. From the Philippines, we had a unique and interesting example of urban gardens and food banks that have really helped buffer the ability of women in informal settlements to withstand COVID-19 induced food shortages. And also we learned about how Android-based platforms were used for effective communications during the pandemic to ensure that people had the right information and knew what to do to withstand the impacts. From Bangladesh, we had a unique example of empowering local women and communities to enhance their ability to deal with climate change and disaster risk reduction. And from the Philippines, again, we had an example of mobile markets that were developed by a national organization looking at what the government was doing to ensure that local entrepreneurs were able to sell food and communities were able to access food. We also had an interesting example about local level flood management that involved community coordinated efforts to declog drains and plant trees. Overall, the feeling was that strong communication and coordination and integration with local groups was key to the success of these local level initiatives for managing disaster risk. With that, Shilajit, I'll hand over to you to tell us a little bit about what transpired in your group and for your closing, for your final reflections. Thank you.
Okay. Well, we had a very interesting mix of people who represented different global to local organizations and networks. And it was interesting to examine how issues and concerns came out of these different initiatives and different understandings and different ways of looking at things. And somehow the whole relationship between floods and transport and all the different issues that came out of that became very evident. And Sarah's closing remarks that floods, drainage, garbage, recycling, livelihoods, and transport, which are all related to critical adaptation practices that are needed to produce resilience and disaster management, were all interconnected. And that women saw it like that. They didn't see it in the silos that globally are seen when you look at different issues. And so that came out very, very clearly and strongly. And that the whole issue that everybody acknowledged is that women's perspectives don't come out sharply. You know, it echoed what Suranjana said before. And that how women produce data and how it interrogated the data that was produced by cities to engage in producing a collective narrative, demonstrated the need to create conditions by which women's voice and agency could navigate the more formal institutional development processes. And therefore, we asked each other the potential of global institutions, global institutions, think tanks and others, having access and humility to dialogue with women's groups and networks, to bring in right in the beginning their issues, concerns, sensitivities, perspectives, visions into the framing of how information is gathered, utilized, and which bring solutions that then go back into the hands of women. So that was my sort of coming out of this. In my closing remarks, my main attempt in this process is to say that the women in grassroots groups truly represent the litmus test of all the global rhetoric that we talk about. If it doesn't touch their demands and expectations, it does not address their problems, it does not include them in the design of the solution, we have all failed. And I think that when we talk in other sessions on climate adaptation principles, financing principles, these issues have to embed the fabric that we weave into the accountability structures, the systems development structures. And we have to make local women's testimonials of defining the challenges, designing the solutions, their executions, and their management, a very central part of this process. And I think for CBA, which is community-based adaptation, as a week-long process, to challenge the NGOs, the think tanks, the bilateral and multilateral institutions discussing this, to realize how patronizing we have all been to grassroots women in treating them as beneficiaries and consumers, and not seriously centrally embedded partners in this process. So I'd like to see how we champion this process across the different sessions and not treat this as we're nice to hear what women have to say, patronizing attitudes and values, however much we believe in the value of it. We go back to our drawing boards and we do the same thing. We design projects that work for funding streams that come out international financing institutions. We don't do that. We challenge that collectively, not to say that it's rubbish, but to say it is transformative. It's part of the new normal. It's part of the post-COVID discussions. So I think let's take these messages back to the plenary sessions, to the larger messages that CBA wants to give to each other and to the outside. So thank you very much. Back to you, Suranjana and Aditya.
All right. Any final reflections?
Suranjana, all yours.
Okay, I just wanted to check. Any final reflections from you, Aditya? Or is it just me? Okay. All right. All right. I think Sheila's already said some very powerful things. And I think the power of this kind of conversations with seasoned grassroots leaders are the power of the conversation is in continuing it. So this is not supposed to be the last conversation on this. This is supposed to be the beginning of a deeper conversation on these different themes. And some of the themes that I felt were brought out quite well and need us to sort of further deepen our analysis on is, one was around the integrated approaches to how women deal with issues which touch on so many different things. The idea that you need some form of you need to negotiate the use of land, or you need to have some kind of secure tenure to grow what you want to grow, or the idea that transport and safety and the drainage and flooding and all the and housing are all interconnected issues. The importance of savings as something that you use for organizing, but also something that gives you options to leverage more money and to demonstrate what you're able to do with communities' own money, the work around flexible funds. I think in addition to Sheila's point about women being the litmus test, I would also say in many ways the COVID crisis has been a big sort of a moment that has tested everyone and has not only surfaced some of the stark realities of development failures, but has at the same time shown what women who were organized and had access to flexible resources could do, how they could move in an agile way to sort of address immediate and more long-term concerns of their communities. And so there's a huge body of work and knowledge and expertise and capacity that's been built over the years. And for climate change adaptation, particularly for locally led action, we really need to do more to understand and leverage that. So with that, I'm going to thank all our speakers, Sarah, Sazini, Leah, Jokas, Naseem, thank you very much for sharing your insights. Big thank you to Sheila, Aditya Bahadur. Thank you so much for joining us today, and to all the audience members who've been patient and very engaged, I can see, in this process. And we hope to meet again and continue these discussions at Gobeshona and the next CBA and so on. So bye-bye and thank you so much.